Welcome to The Watcher. I'm your cult leader Tom Pod, and I just watched episode 2 of Loki, the variant. And before I get into what I liked, disliked, and all that recap and reviewy stuff, why don't you give this video a like? Because of course, I'm breaking down this every week, Loki and all the other nerdy Marvel stuff, along with a couple of other things on this channel. So if you want to check out more of that, subscribe, please do. So, episode 2. Last week we kind of touched upon the fact that episode 1, like a lot of pilots, and certainly one you would need, especially for something that is a little bit complex. The first episode is going to be laying the foundation. There was a lot of that, and I think some people kind of had that impression. They were like, hey, it was good. I hope the rest of the show was going to, use all that information they dumped on us and actually deliver on the promise. And in my opinion, they really did that here. We're only 2 episodes in. I'm already like, man, it's only 6 episodes of this. So yeah, I really like this episode. I'm going to get into it now in a bit more detail with a recap. And before I kind of jump in all the way, I do want to go over 2 things that I sort of brushed over a little bit last week. When I talked about Kang the Conqueror, I put what I meant to say and what I had written down in the video version, but I never actually said it. The timekeepers they show in Mrs. Minutes exposition dump. And the kind of statues, one of them looks a lot like Kang the Conqueror, who of course I mentioned is going to be a major villain in the MCU, we imagine. But at the very least he's going to be a villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. He's of course a villain that we normally associate with time. And is he going to appear here? I know the actor Jonathan Majors has kind of dodged the question, but of course everyone does that with Marvel. So yeah, I don't know, are we going to get an appearance here? Possibly not. I think if we do, it'll be very slight. We might get a mention of him, or confirmation that he was one of the timekeepers as we go on. And I also didn't really mention the weapon, which I don't know how I did mention that. I had it written down and everything. But again, Loki Wednesdays are getting to me, man. I was so set on Fridays. Loki Wednesdays are a lot, man. I'm tired in the middle of the week. Oh, but anyway, the weapon is dated from the 3rd millennium. Kang the Conqueror is from the 31st century. So, presumably another Kang the Conqueror Easter egg or misdirection. We will have to see. But this week, we started again with a bit of a flashback. And that is, we're at a Renaissance fair in Wisconsin in 1985. Boy, what a time to be alive and what a place to be. A Renaissance fair in Wisconsin. And we start with the TVA showing up and walking into a tent with, of course, we assume is in pursuit of the variant. Now, this is where things get confusing, because of course last week we learned that the variant is Loki, and as opposed to our own Loki. So I'm going to call the variant Loki just the variant, or variant Loki. I'll just call the other Loki our Loki, I suppose, because man, it can get confusing. But thankfully there's something at the end of this episode that might make it a little bit easier to refer to these characters. So I want to talk first about the music, because first of all, the music in the show in general is actually very good. I like it. It's kind of sci-fi and understated. It's not too flashy most of the time. It's very sci-fi. Of course they're listening to theremin music because of course, it's they're weirdo sci-fi people. If you don't know what the theremin is, it's the Star Trek instrument. Not a good instrument. You can make some cool sounds with it. What I did there was about as good as the theremin, but somehow they made it sound pretty good. But that's not the song that they play over the speaker here. I want to talk about a song that. Did the rights on this song lapse in the last couple of weeks or something? This song, okay, which the song in question is Holding Out for a Hero by Bonnie Tyler, has been in 3 different things that were pretty hyped and pretty big in the last week. I don't know if it's all the one guy putting this stuff together, or if there's just a big WhatsApp chat of all these music supervisors and they all just remembered how much of a tune this is. It reminds me of Shrek 2. It also reminds me of Short Circuit 2. I think I might be the only one who hears a song and is like, Short Circuit 2, man, alright. Yeah, so they're kind of lured into a trap. We see something here that we also see again later on, which is that seemingly this person is being enchanted or possessed, is what I have written down, by this variant. And there's a person here, I think the code name for this, and I heard these people called the Minutemen. I'm not sure, is that just the kind of thing that's caught on us fans? This agent C20 is kind of possessed and takes out all the rest of the agents except for one. And that final one is taken out by the variant. Dun, dun, dun. They really are holding out for a hero. Is that hero going to be Loki? Who knows? Look, I'm totally okay if you want to keep using that song and everything. It rocks. It's good to hear it again. We then get into the show proper, where we have a bit more Miss Minutes, mate. Don't we all love Miss Minutes? We all fell in love with Miss Minutes. And boys, as I pointed out, she's single. It's Miss Minutes, not Mrs. Hey, hey, hey. So yeah, she's testing Loki on terminology as he presumably is going to become a TVA agent. He's reading a jet ski magazine, which, man, I didn't think that would be a pop point, but it kind of is. Yeah, basically we find out that that's like Mobius's desk, and Mobius thinks jet skis are awesome, don't we all? And he says he's never been on one, as it would probably branch the timeline like of it for a TVA agent to be on a jet ski. But he's kind of like, hey, these are awesome. This just kind of proves what we're fighting for. Jet skis. That's kind of what I love. Like this weird humor that kind of works, but it's also kind of silly. But also, like honestly, there wasn't a lot of laughs in this episode, and I really liked that. It kind of took itself pretty seriously, but there was some good stuff in here, with a few kind of laughs. But it wasn't like something that, like a lot of the Marvel stuff you can accuse of being a bit too jokey in moments where it should be serious. I don't think that's the case for Loki so far. I think it's really good at walking that line. But yeah, I do want to talk about what Miss Minutes was speaking about, because I wrote this down before I finished the episode. I was like, this seems like it's going to play off later on. I was thinking like the end of the show. No, it's right here. So she says, what happens when a Nexus event branches past the red line? And I have a graphic behind me here. We saw in the first episode of what's kind of happening there, visual representation of that. And of course, Loki says, very bad things. What he says, it's when the TVA can no longer reset the Nexus event, which we saw in the first episode. We see it a couple times here. When they go back to the tent in a minute, the same issues arise. They're able to reset the timeline. If they don't reset it in time, that's when we have, a Nexus event that goes past the red line. As for what entirely that means, does this mean it's now a reality they cannot undo? Who knows? Could it lead to one of these multiversal wars? That's kind of a big question we have as we get to the end of the episode, but I won't get ahead of myself. But yes, she also says that would lead to the destruction of the timeline and the collapse of reality as we know it. I mean, if I'm thinking Into the Spider-Verse, isn't that like the realities are collapsing, they're all on top of each other? I don't know, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Is this all set up for multiverse, which is going to be pivotal to the rest of the MCU? I think it very likely is. But anyway, also we learned, by the way, it might be hard to marry Miss Minutes, but she's not just a recording, she is alive. And as upon hearing that, Loki tries swatting her, which, get away from my wife! Sorry. It was just a bit weird that he did that, but anyway, Loki's kind of, not even now he's just a little bit of a dick. Very arrogant in this episode as well, man. So with all this, we learned that Loki has a lot of different variants, and the Time Variance Authority has been dealing with a lot of different ones. But they had like a Frost Giant one, they had a Hulk one. I was like, man, I want to see some of these. They've said they have a Loki, and he's popping up all over the time screen. And because of that, they hope, or Loki hopes, that if he helps them capture them, he's going to get to meet the Timekeepers, which, very pivotal to point out here, is that Mobius has never met the Timekeepers either, even though he sort of hints to Loki that, hey, you'll get to meet them. So, it seems unlikely if you've never met them either. After this, our Minutemen, our whole group of people, decide to show up at this Renaissance Fair and figure out what's going on. They also have a very kind of, again, what I like here is that they're not just throwing all the rules at you for all the things, like that could be potential plot holes. But one of the things that people might say is like, well, why didn't you come before the variant attacks? And they basically say that the timeline is still developing, so you can't go back to the start of it. You have to kind of come in real time, which is interesting. It's an easy way out of that obvious scenario. So they're there trying to figure out what's going on. We get a very cool line from Loki where she says, an Asgardian saying, which he says, where there are wolf's ears, wolf's teeth are near. In other words, be aware of your surroundings. And that's something Loki used, he says, to kind of take advantage of people using his mischief. Now, again, this was a little strange. It sort of showed Loki kind of trying to play it suave and cool and sort of being out of his depth, potentially. But he's basically saying, like, now that we're in this tent, you should know the variant is outside this tent ready to attack us. And he's like, he's going to try to recruit me to overthrow and rule the TVA. And he tells them he wants assurances before he does anything. that he basically won't be disintegrated with the TVA if he helps them. And they don't buy his bluff. And then because of that, they reset the timeline, and that's the end of that. So you're kind of like, was he really outside? Later on, they kind of hint that there was someone outside, and we certainly seem to see evidence that Loki does want to overthrow the timeline. Although how sincere he's being about that is kind of up for debate at this point. They also kind of again hammer home that idea that you should have been listening when Miss Minutes was talking, because the reason they had to kind of make that call was because they said they were getting near the red line, and that is why they had to do it. So with all that said, they go back to the TVA, and we have a look inside Ravonna Renslayer's office. Again, timekeepers are everywhere. Again, I mentioned last week Ravonna's kind of love interest often is Kang the Conqueror, and certainly she has timekeepers all over the place. I think that there's very likely there's some relationship there, maybe not a romantic one, but that she's definitely working for them. Michael Waldron, I believe, is the guy who's the head writer on the show. He said he's a big fan of Mad Men. You can definitely see it in the sort of aesthetic. Like, it's a very kind of the look, and this is what I like. The look of the TVA is very interesting. It's like, because you could have just gone obvious sci-fi office, but it's sort of like a retro kind of look with real sci-fi sensibilities. Like, those things shouldn't mess. It's like retro futurism, I guess. Is that a term? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. If I just invented it, I want to trademark that, please. So yeah, you can definitely see the Mad Men kind of influence. You know, it's two people in an office that's all mahogany and they're drinking in the middle of the day. Or is it the middle? Time doesn't matter, I guess. It's always the middle of the day. Or do these people like sleep? I don't know. These are the questions I'm thinking of now that I probably never get an answer to. So he basically says, look, the mission didn't go as planned. And his idea is that he's basically saying, like, if he has, like, our Loki with him, he's going to be able to do a better job of understanding the variant Loki and try to catch him. So that's kind of why he's there. He's like basically keeping him close so he can study him, I guess, to a certain degree. And then he basically says, look, if this doesn't work out, I'll delete Loki myself. So it's like, oh shit, where is this gonna go? From here, Mobius says to Loki, like, look, do your research. So you catch the variant. We need to catch the variant. Go to the archives, find all this information, etc., etc. And he goes there, and he basically finds everything is classified. What I like here is that they're, and again, how much will they go into it? They're slowly teasing that the TVA isn't necessarily what it seemed, is not necessarily all above board. Are they doing this for good reasons? We had a big kind of debate last week about free will and whether everything is predetermined and that kind of thing. They kind of hint at, they don't really hint at it here. They go back into that here, and it doesn't definitely seem that it's all order. There's no chaos, which of course Loki wouldn't necessarily like. So they're kind of showing the seeds of conflict there straight away. Even if Loki did side with them all the way, which it doesn't seem like he fully is, there is a lot of reason to be suspicious of the TVA, because he goes to the archive and he's like, I want to know have all the files on the formation of TVA. That's classified. Okay, what about the beginning of time? Classified. And what he does get is like very few files, but the files he gets are very interesting, involving the variant or Loki in general. Really, has the destruction of Asgard, something that kind of upsets him. I really liked here how subtle it was. It was almost just like a kind of look in his eye. It wasn't like he just burst out crying. Tom Hiddleston is just fantastic. He really, really is. He's fantastic in this role. And he just has the character nailed down. It's hard not to root for this character. I think in lesser hands, like an unlikable character like Loki wouldn't be something fans could get behind and love as much as they love this Loki because of Tom Hiddleston. So hats off to you, or horned hat off to you, or whatever. They say here, Loki kind of looks at this and he's analysing the file, and he sees like there's no variance energy, I think it was the phrase, during the destruction of Asgard. And he kind of thinks about it like basically like how it's a massive, like it's like a category 9 or 10 apocalypse event or something, and 9,000 people died in the destruction of Asgard or something. And he then says to Owen Wilson, and this is where we get to see Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston just bounce off each other so well. Like, again, I said it, I kind of sneak dissed Owen Wilson last week. I was like, Tom Hiddleston is an excellent actor, and Owen Wilson can be an excellent actor. I was like, look, Owen Wilson is a great actor, but sometimes he just plays the same character over and over again. They are really, really good together. They have a really good chemistry. Like, in the hands of lesser actors, all these scenes of them just sitting around talking about basically philosophy and, time travel and this kind of stuff would be dreadfully slow and a total slog, but they do great here. And of course, it's down to some of the writing as well. But what we have is basically, he says, like, Nexus events happen when someone does something they're not supposed to. Okay, that's his definition. He goes, yeah, it's a bit of a simple definition, but that's what it is. He says, essentially doing that kind of creates a lot of decisions that shouldn't happen. And I guess that is why the branch starts to sort of grow. He says all this results in a branch with a timeline. Now, what he is saying, his theory, Loki's theory, that's right. I don't know if I have a Tom's theory this week, so it'll have to be Loki's theory, I guess. He says that basically he thinks the variant is hiding in apocalyptic scenarios, in apocalypse events, like, say, the destruction of Asgard. He is hiding, and here is why. Okay, and he does like a whole analogy with like a salad. that was a bit like okay, you know, it wasn't like as succinct as some of those other analogies you see in like a Star Trek or whatever. But basically, the idea is that, let's say, in this scenario, it's destruction of Asgard. He says, I can go down there and I can push the Hulk off the Rainbow Bridge, or I could have a big party or piss up, and all this stuff. Like, basically, he could do all the stuff that in the normal circumstances would totally be a Nexus event, change the timeline, and make it branch off because that wasn't meant to happen. In an apocalyptic event, it doesn't matter because it's the wheels are already in motion for what's basically the end of the timeline. It's not going to branch because the timeline ends there, is what he's essentially saying. So because of that, he says, if you hide there, any action you were to take that would normally violate the one true stream. I can't remember what do they call it? It's like the fateful stream. I can't remember what it's called, but the main timeline that they're trying to keep neat and tidy. That's not going to change if you do anything here because it's it's a finite event anyway. The wheels are in motion. You can't stop them essentially, and he says like that is where he's hiding because all his actions basically don't have consequences on the timeline. If everything is destined for destruction, then nothing you do matters because it won't branch timeline as it's going to be destroyed anyway, essentially. Okay? Now, to prove his theory, I was really... This was an entertaining scene, but I thought they did a funny thing here where, like... Because, of course, for this to work, you have to take your characters into a scenario where a lot of people die, but also you're like, okay, well, it has to be something a long time ago where no one's going to get offended. So they go to Pompeii because, of course, that was nearly 2,000 years ago. It was in 79 AD where everyone was killed by the volcano exploding and covered in ash and preserved. So I think also they make some general rules about like what is an apocalypse event. It has to be something natural, apparently. Like, in other words, it couldn't be like a mass loss of life in a war or anything like that. But there you go. And one of the things I thought was funny about this was Loki's kind of giddy and like Owen Wilson's like, man, look, I know, like... I know you're giddy, like I get it, like, but come on, all these people are going to die. I mean, I know it was a long time. Like, basically, it's kind of funny because and it is a total dick move, but it's also kind of funny seeing Loki just giddy for the end of the world, and he wants to prove his point. So that basically whatever he does doesn't matter. So he rants about how he works with a TVA. He sets a guy's goats free, which everyone's in cool with. He shouts a bit in Italian, like, I'm the god of mischief. I'm from the future. I'm Loki. Blah 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 blah. And as he's doing this, Mobius is looking at the time stream, which is not branching off at all. So he's correct. The variant, therefore, could be hiding in apocalyptic events without anyone being aware. He was there and his actions would have no consequences. Okay? Now, I want to also bring up something I left out last week. I kind of took it for what it was. I didn't think it would be a big clue. When Owen Wilson was in the church talking to the kid who saw the variant, and he pointed to the kind of devil in the window, which is apparently not Mephisto. They made very clear this week. I think they were like, Mephisto is not in the show. I think they were already like, oh God, people are analysing this a lot. Oh God, Mephisto all over again. But yeah, the kid there, and of course this was like the 15th century or 16th century. He had like gum. And I just thought like, oh yeah, it's probably just gum from whatever period. But it's gum from the future gum. Yeah, it's like maybe it's like Willy Wonka gum where it's like a full meal or whatever. I don't know. Oh, there's too much bones in this ham gum.
And this ham gum is all bones.
So yeah, they basically noticed that and they took that as evidence when they were last there. Okay, so before I come into that, I should mention also there's no candy in Asgard, which wow. No wonder Loki's evil, man. I actually just felt bad for Loki. Literally, my note here is they have no candy in Asgard. Frowny face. Poor, like, Imagine being gods and you can do anything, and then you're like, chocolate? What is chocolate? We eat grapes and nuts. Oh man, come on. So yeah, that's a big clue for them. Okay, so as I mentioned, they had a gum called Kablooey in the last episode, and that gum they find is basically was available from 2047 to 2051. Which, man, that gum wasn't available for a very long time. 4 years for a gum? That doesn't seem great. Maybe it was an alternate flavor. They cross-reference this with apocalyptic events, and they hope in doing this they will find the variant. Now, I'd also want to say that they had a kind of a big debate just before this when they were sitting down in the cafeteria. I guess they eat. But they basically say like free will doesn't exist. Past, present, and future is sort of set or will be set. Okay. He says basically the TVA preserves the past, which obviously will affect the present. But the timekeepers are still untangling the future to see how it all ends. So that Loki was kind of like, what's the conclusion? Like, how does this all, wrap up, basically? And he was like, well, we don't know that yet. The timekeepers will figure that out. So, again, when you put that much power into these timekeepers' hands, are they altering it to suit their own methods? We don't know. And this is where he talks about the jet ski, by the way. And he's like, that's what it's all for, a jet ski. Like, look, I don't care if it doesn't fit the show. We all want a final scene where he's riding a jet ski. That's all we want. He'll learn time doesn't matter anymore, and he'll jet ski into the sun. That's all I want. Come on. We got Falcon on a boat. Give me Mobius on a jet ski, please. It's interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of room here where you're like, that's a lot of power to give these timekeepers. Do they have good, motivations at heart? Who knows? But it's interesting. Basically, because of that, Loki kind of says to Mobius, like, we're like the only ones with any free will because we're doing this. We're not really bound by the time, so you're preserving it and that kind of thing. So that was kind of interesting. So I'll go back to them. And this was not in real time. They found it faster than I came back to it. But they were looking for an event that matched the 2047 to 2051 scenario, and they found Roxcart, the Roxcart disaster in Alabama in 2050. Loki is still hoping to meet the timekeepers, by the way. Owen Wilson sort of brushes that off. Mobius, I should call, like, I feel bad. I'm like Loki and Owen Wilson. I'm like Loki and Mobius. Come on, man. Or Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson. Do them both. Don't do Owen Wilson dirty, man. So yeah, one thing I want to point out here is they don't make this like explicitly clear, but I assume Roxcart is a reference to the Roxxon Energy Company, Roxxon Oil Corporation. They have many, many different names in the comics. So basically, they were just like an evil organization that Marvel could use so they wouldn't get sued. So they're basically like a Walmart here, I guess. And there's seemingly, I think it's a hurricane going to hit Alabama, and people are using the warehouse there as kind of a shelter. And this is where they're going, because obviously all these people are going to die. Which that's a bit of a downer. I'm glad they didn't focus on that too long. But again, they did acknowledge it, which is, again, I'm like, that's cool. It's it's not cool that all these people died. I'm saying it's cool that, like, they're not kind of, throwing in a load of jokes or, these people will be okay, maybe we can say, like, it's being very matter of fact. It's very sci-fi. Like, it's the prime directive from Star Trek, basically. It's like, we can't interfere with this. We can observe and all this kind of thing. I think that's the prime directive, is it? I'm not big enough Star Trek fan to say that definitively, but you know what I'm saying. It's like they're cold and analytical, and that's what a big credit, because not all the Marvel stuff would have that kind of level of maturity, I think. So Mobius, Loki, and the TVA squad show up, which is also, by the way, Loki has a cool trick. They actually kind of what's the word I'm looking for? They kind of set this up earlier on when we talking about like the difference between like projection and like duplicating himself. But basically, like, they're out in the rain, Loki's soaking wet, and then he changes, there's a bit of magic and he's dry. And he's like, how'd you do that? He's like, oh, I don't want to be squeaking around on the floor. Which is fair enough. So as they're doing this, we see the cloaked figure, the variant Loki, or at least we assume it's the variant Loki, watching over the store using CCTV. And you see that they plant a 20-minute timer nearby, very ominous. So in the store, they split up Agent Loki, who is, of course, our Loki, goes off with B-15, who I didn't give a name last week. This is the same agent that Loki put, the time collar around and was messing with. She's kind of like the kind of more prominent agent. She seems to be kind of one of the leaders of these squads, these Minutemen. And as they're going around, she confronts what could be a suspicious man. She's like, could this be you, Loki? And when she does, she gets enchanted, she gets possessed, and starts speaking as the variant Loki to our Loki. So this is them kind of having a conversation. As they're doing this, by the way, I should have mentioned at the start there, we had that one agent that was possessed at the start, C20, was taken hostage. And as Loki is talking to, as our Loki is talking to the variant Loki, you see how this could get really confusing. The other Minutemen have found C20, and she's kind of babbling and tied up. And she says that she told the variant Loki where the timekeepers are and how he can find them. Oh shit! You do wonder if this is going to end up with them just tearing the TVA down because they learned some of the sinister secrets. But it's kind of too early to tell. I think the pacing of this is really good so far. So we will see. It's one of the only shows that they've kind of seemingly been like, we might do a season 2. I think they actually had done a small bit of work on season 2, possibly. I don't think it was officially confirmed, but I could kind of see this running, but I don't want it to run for too long either. I want them to get to a natural endpoint as opposed to just saying we need a recurring series. So as they're doing that, of course, Loki is talking and walking around. We see that the variant is planting what seems to be explosives around the store to wipe out the TVA squad. Our Loki is saying to him, what he had said or what Mobius had predicted he wanted to do, which was overthrow and rule the TVA. And the other Loki, the variant Loki, kind of brushes that off. He's like, "It's ridiculous, or whatever." After that, the enchantment kind of swaps a few times, and basically it ends up with a bit of a fist fight. This, I think, what I will say is this episode had very little action. And I think that some people could be put off by that. For me, this was I didn't need action in this show. I don't It's not like I'm expecting a big superhero punch up from Loki anyway. So there is a bit of a fight. It's actually it kind of went the opposite way. It was so funny. It was like such a low tech kind of funny fight. They're fighting around like electronics and home appliances. At one point, he hits him with a Hoover. I'm just like, that's hilarious. That's kind of funny. I'm like, you go from the over the top nature of like a Falcon and Winter Soldier or WandaVision where they're shooting superpowers at each other in the sky, and then it's like he's swinging a Hoover. Oh, it's great. So yeah, that's what's going on. Eventually we have this whole fight, and it's kind of Loki kind of turns around and the person he's fighting is gone, and out emerges the variant, who revealed herself. Yeah, that's right. They did a Metroid Prime, and it was a lady the whole time. Yeah, bloody sexist. Yeah, this is in fact, well, it's up for debate. For now, I'm going to call her Lady Loki. Okay, I'll come back to that in a sec because that does need some dissection. Okay, the timer goes off, and all these bombs, it turns out, weren't bombs. They're instead kind of time. I thought they were reset charges, but I don't think they were. But they basically go to all these other times and locations and start forming new branches on the timeline. And we cut back to the TVA kind of control room, and there's a timeline, and there's just seemingly hundreds of branches to the timeline. They do show the locations, they do show the times. I don't think any of the times are actually kind of consistent with what's going on in the MCU. But a lot of locations, of course, we've heard of in the MCU, a lot of locations on Earth. I think there's one on Ego as well, and all these kind of places that we know from the MCU. So of course they're freaking out at the TVA. We see them start to dispatch squads, but of course, as we learned this week, if they don't reset those in time, they're going to pass the red line, and then that could be a very serious thing. I will go into what we have to kind of speculate on what this ending means as well in a minute. So, but at the very end of the episode, we see Lady Loki, who's played by Sofia Di Martino. He walks through a time portal. I think they give it a better. It might be called a time door in this. I can't really remember. And Loki just stands there, and the portal is still open, and he sees the TVA rushing towards him, and they're like pleading with him to wait. And then Loki follows her through. The portal closes, and we get our credits. Whoa. Yeah, as I thought this was a really good episode. I really enjoyed it. I think it shows a lot of promise. And I think there's a lot of big ramifications here potentially. Okay? First of all, what the hell does that ending mean? And I'm not talking about him going through the portal. I'm talking about, is this the multiverse? Now, I've seen a lot of people suggest it is. See, the thing is, I didn't take it as a multiverse, but I suppose it can be. Like, when I think multiverse, I think like different dimensions. But of course, with alternate timelines, I mean, with lots of different possibilities, I mean, what really is the difference? I kind of think like if you're going full multiverses and having different dimensions, you can kind of go weirder with it, which a lot of Marvel stuff is kind of weird in the multiverse dimensions, but doesn't need to be necessarily. And I suppose if you made a branch really, really long ago, that universe could develop incredibly strangely. So it's an interesting one. I would assume though, like this is something like this is what I think we all like assumed would happen. But I think it happening in the second episode is a ballsy move. Does it mean that this is the start of the multiverse? I would say very likely. At the very least, it leads to branching timelines. You know, and that means that there's going to be all different versions of the characters we know anyway, which could potentially lead to a Secret Wars or whatever like that. It could. I mean, there's a lot of implications for this in theory. How much they will use it, I don't know. I mean, look, we kept saying multiverse in WandaVision, and it kind of didn't matter. So, you don't want to get gun shy. And that's definitely kind of what we need to be careful with when it comes to Loki, because we had to learn a few lessons after WandaVision, myself included. So, definitely we're going to have some timelines that are running concurrently, seemingly. If you looked at the graph that I had behind me earlier, like it branches out and then kind of goes in the same direction. So interesting stuff. Now, as I mentioned before, like Nexus beings are characters that are the same in every dimension or every reality. Loki is not a Nexus being. That is why there's variants of him. Okay. Then we need to go into this character. Okay. Now, this is okay. I'm not going to say spoiler. Because it is technically in this episode. It is a potential mistake in the credits, I should say. That being said, it's been up for hours now, and they haven't changed it. So maybe it's a misdirect. I don't know. I think that would be genius if they said they're misdirects. So, like, I want to say beforehand, when we had WandaVision, the identity of and the fact that MP was in the show was like leaked a long time beforehand because of a voice actor that was listed, a foreign language voice actor. But here it seems Disney did this themselves. A lot of people assume this is Lady Loki. On the surface, it looks like Lady Loki. Now, first of all, let's get into Lady Loki a bit, okay? Lady Loki is again a pretty new character. I think it was like 2007. I think it was Lady Loki. But basically, what happened was following Ragnarok, Loki is reborn into a body that was meant to be made for Sif, and because of that, we have Lady Loki, and it's become sort of a fan favorite character over time. The other thing is that Loki in the comics and in the show, even though it's been quite subtle about it, is gender fluid. In fact, in the comics, essentially, if we go into Loki's powers more specifically, basically he can go in. I think he said something along the lines of like, "I can become anything as long as it's me." As long as he's Loki, he can become anything, as long as it's Loki. Like he has become Kid Loki, which is a pretty popular version of him. There is, of course, Lady Loki in this scenario. Okay, and but aside from that, it's Lady Loki. I mean, it's pretty much just Loki. As for the gender fluid thing, it was in a TVA file in episode 1 that he was gender fluid. They've definitely hinted on that in the past, in the comics and all that kind of stuff, and seemingly they will do it here at some point. But again, the question is first of all, is this Lady Loki a variant of Loki in the timeline? So in other words, has it always been a Lady Loki in that timeline or whatever? Is it a male Loki that just changed his gender to be female and be Lady Loki? Is it just an illusion altogether? That's not something that we're entirely aware of. And then the big question, and this is why I brought up the subtitles and the credits, is this Lady Loki at all? Okay, again, I guess I'll say slight spoilers. I don't think it's that big a deal, really. But the Spanish credit listing for this, all the credits list her as the variant. Okay, Sofia Di Martino, as it says, the variant in all these credits, except for I think it's like the Catalina ones, the Spanish ones. They list her as Sylvie. Now, Sylvie Luston is a very recent version of a character called Enchantress. Okay, now there's been another Enchantress. This is a more recent one who has a sort of resemblance and general powers of that Enchantress. And the thing is, that character gets their powers directly from Loki. Okay? In fact, there's some suggestion that the character never even existed until Loki kind of made them. Which again would be a very big kind of jump for Loki in the power tier, I guess, for lack of a better term. The other thing we should sort of acknowledge is that this version kind of looks like her. I mean, that she's got blonde hair. Loki, like, why Loki's hair would change doesn't really make a lot of sense. He seemingly has dark hair in all the timelines that we've seen him in. But then again, I mean, he has magic, like changing hair color. You don't need magic to change your hair color, kids. So that could be absolutely nothing. The other thing we should mention is that there is apparently an actress that's been cast as young Sylvie. So it seemingly it confirms that Enchantress is going to be this in some form. It probably makes the most sense that this is her. At one point as well, when Possessed B15 says enchantment is a clever trick. So I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this actually isn't Lady Loki. It's maybe just a nod to Lady Loki. Maybe it's an amalgamation of two characters. Who knows? Now, the other thing we should mention is the fact that just because the variant Loki that we were expecting is Enchantress, that doesn't mean there's not a variant Loki out there. Because, of course, they've dealt with other variant Lokis. There could still be a variant Loki. And this is, oh, actually, I do have room for it. Tom's Theory. Wah, wah, wah. I'm taking it back, Loki. Richard E. Grant is in this series, okay? Richard E. Grant, he was in Can You Ever Forgive Me? I think he was in Rise of Skywalker. He's done a lot of stuff. He's in Logan as well, I think. You'd recognize him, okay? Pretty decent name actor to be in this show. They have not revealed who he's playing, though. Michael Waldron was asked about this recently and kind of was a bit like, oh, I can't spoil that, but it's a fun one. A lot of people are suggesting, a lot of fans are suggesting, and I think this could kind of make sense, that he is an older version of Loki. So, maybe that older version of Loki is the variant Loki. Maybe this is the Loki that gave Enchantress her powers. Potentially. It is a very interesting one. And again, lot to unpack here. This is what I really like with the show. It's less vague, I think, than WandaVision. WandaVision had so many theories, but I think this one has like a couple of different ways it could go, and it's all interesting. And I think they've really handled the more complicated elements of it incredibly well. The only other thing I want to mention, and this is such a minor thing, so, and again, it might tie into this because, of course, we're assuming that at some point, if Richard E. Grant is playing an older Loki, that he's going to be Tom Hiddleston, the younger Loki, and they'll have a chat or something, okay? The Time Variance Authority are drinking Justice Soda, which is a Pepsi product that was discontinued in 1999, I think it was. It was basically like an energy soda. I think it was only around for like a couple of years, and I don't think it's ever come back. But obviously they have a certain fondness for it, or certainly Owen Wilson does. And I looked this up. I was like, maybe is there anything more to this? And there's a section on it, on Wikipedia, where it says, an advert featured an old man and he speaks to a younger man. The old man tells the younger man about his life as a youth and how he wished he had more fun.
When I was your age, there was this group of guys, crazy bunch they were. They were always trying to get me to stay out all hours, chase women, party till dawn. But I didn't. And you know what?
You wish you had.
Every day of my life.
Could that be a very sneaky Easter egg about how this series could go? Could we have old Loki telling young Loki about some of his mistakes? Maybe you should have more fun. You need free will. You need to dismantle the TVA because otherwise you're just on this path. We don't need order. We need chaos. You are Loki. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe that's a total stretch by me. I'm probably seeing stuff that isn't there. But, you know, that is the second episode of Loki. That is the variant. Really enjoyable episode, in my opinion. I hope you enjoyed the episode as well. And I hope you let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. Or if you've got your own theories or thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Aside from that, I should mention that Disney have now confirmed that every original series will air on Wednesday when it has a new episode. So I guess this is our new slot. So I prefer to when it was Friday, man. But, you know, we'll soldier on. Watcher Wednesdays it is, I guess. That is episode 2 of Loki. That was The Watcher for this week. I hope you had a good time with it. I hope you got something out of it at the very least. And if you want to give me something back, please give this a like and please subscribe. Because, of course, I'll be going through an episode next week. Please come back so we can go through episode 3 of Loki. And remember, I'll be watching. Take care.